Okay, welcome back to session 2. So in this video, we're actually going to let's focus on Power Apps, right? So this is going to be the first one in the list that we talked through yesterday. Now, with Power Apps, understand this, that it takes on many different forms. Power Apps is really just a technology platform that you would use to build different solutions. So what can you build with the different solutions? So with Power Apps, you can build SharePoint list forms. This is going to be more so the replacement for some of the form solutions we used to leverage in the past for legacy SharePoint, similar to legacy form solutions like infopath, Nintex forms, K2 forms, and other third-party forms. So with SharePoint list forms, you're going to build this where it's going to be in the context of a SharePoint list. You're going to see all the different items. You click on the item, that custom form will pop up showing the needed information that's for that particular item. You can also create have a custom experience or, a custom form to gather, for that new experience, to gather the needed information that's needed for that. There's also patterns and tips and tricks within Power Apps when it comes to forms to where you can show how it feels based on the current user, and you can kind of create this pseudo role scenario within your solutions to say, okay, if the current user is a approver, then show them these fields. If the current user is a admin, then show them these fields. And that approver or admin role is something that you could create. Then you pepper in the logic within Power Apps to show how those fields. So very, very robust, really taking our skill set to a whole new level compared to what we could do in the prescriptive form solution like infopath, Nintex form, K2 form, so on and so forth. And now we're dealing with these Lego blocks. So now we can pull and piece these things together to suit our needs. So, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually show you an example of all of these here shortly. The next one we have is going to be a standalone form for mobile. So with Power Apps, and here's the other cool thing about it, you can use the same editor that you use in Power Apps to create a custom list form, in the context of a SharePoint list or document library. That same editor enables you to create a mobile app. Now, this is not going to be, let me put some context around this. This is not going to be a mobile app to where you drop in the Apple Store, you drop into the Google Play Store, and then everyone in the world will have access to it, right? Actually, yes, that's coming. But as soon as they click on your app, one, they're going to have to authenticate, and the authentication is going to assume that they're going to be part of your organization. So these are mobile apps that you're creating in the context of your organization. Again, if you're part of an aggressive organization, so a progressive organization, one that's starting to realize that mobile apps do have a place within the organization, especially for field reps, those that work in the warehouses, those that work on, in trucks, any user, they call them deskless user, that's not in the traditional office, traditional cubicle, that have monitors and desktops and laptops, dongle, whatever, to your scenario. These are going to be associates or individuals who are always on the go. And even your executive team, right? The executive team seem to love using iPads and tablets more so than laptops. And I don't know if there's many of us left that actually use desktops. So this will allow you to create a mobile a mobile app right there in the context of your organization. So what's the next one? This is going to be a standalone form for really built with a form factor that works very well for tablets. So you can do iPads, Samsung tablets, or Chromebook, or whatever the case may be, those tablet form factors, as well as desktop, right? Because when I say standalone form, and the technical term for that is called the Canvas apps. You will see that reference a lot, when you go to create these. But I call them standalone because when you bring these up, this is the only thing that you see. It takes over the entire screen, and this is the experience. Hence the term standalone. Now, for the tablet or desktop, the good news is you can use it in both scenarios, the exact same app, right? So it's not like mobile where you're going to build a version that's going to be more portrait or a form factor that's going to be, finger or thumb friendly. And, usually you have to build those with that intent of that form factor. Whereas in tablet, you build it once and it looks beautiful on iPad, the same as in desktop, is standalone. So that's why you have that slash there. And again, it's the same concept. You're going to get more real estate to play with. So you're going to have to, really try to figure out what is the right experience. Do you really need a form to stretch the entire width that form factor, or do you want to maybe display existing items and then allow them to create new, and you pop the form over to the left, or some so on and so forth, right? So this is one of those scenarios where, during your design phase, right, and we'll talk about what is the cycle or the evolution of creating these solutions. But during your design phase, when you're wireframing this out, this is where you really try to maximize the use of your white space, because now you have room to do a lot more, to show a lot more, or to show different views and navigation elements to complete this form. So the standalone form for tablet and desktop, that's going to be the other app type that you can create. Okay, let's talk about the next one. The next one is going to be the standalone form for using the model-driven application. Now, what does this mean exactly? And those of us who are professional developers, we know that there's different paths when creating an app. So you can create an application starting with the UI and kind of work your way down to the data source. Or, and this is what this option is, you can start with the data source and then from there generate the UI based on the data source and the relationships of that data. And that's exactly what we do here with the model-driven. Now, model-driven may sound complex, but actually from 0 to 100 with getting something done, the model-driven is actually going to be the fastest way to get the market. And the reason for that is because you focus on how you want to store your data, how you want to structure your data, and the relationships at the data layer. So what do I mean by that? So say, for example, we're going to create a help desk ticketing system, right? And let's just keep it very simple. Help desk ticketing system, I need to know the title of your ticket or issue, a brief description of it, give it a category, and maybe a due date or severity, a priority, or something like that, right? So just imagine we label all of those data points, or we create those columns in our data source, and this could be Dataverse, SQL, SharePoint list, And then once you do that, like say, for example, categories may have a lookup, in a separate table or a separate list or whatever. But once you do that, you structure your data, or you create the schema for your data, hit generate, and it creates the screens for you. Very magical, very interesting concept. Now, the pros and cons with this, one, the UI is kind of given to you, and it's going to generate your basic CRUD operations to create a new record, to modify or view existing records, and to, I don't know about delete, but you probably have to pepper in a delete if you give your end users that capability, right? So you can really go, I mean, this is where, usually where Microsoft advertise Power Apps, how fast it is to create solutions, so on and so forth. They usually show you an example of a model-driven application, because really you can sit there in a matter of 5 to 7 minutes, have a fully functional application based on some existing, based on some data model or data schema. So very, very powerful. The cons on that would be that the UI that's given may be more prescriptive, right? There's certain things that you can and cannot change, and not necessarily you can't change it, but when you try to move things around because you didn't create those screens, you pretty much have to figure out how the wizard kind of put those screens together for you. And usually, mostly the new, I want to say amateur, that's probably not the right term, but the newbies in this space, when they go to adjust and say, okay, I just want to move this here and tweak this here, they find themselves that they break stuff, and they have to, they do a lot of scrap and redo, because you're working with a generated solution. So pepper in the pieces that you need to kind of make it your own, or kind of make it unique to your requirement, usually cause you more headache than you initially wanted to bite off. All right, so model-driven, very powerful. The Dataverse model-driven applications have a different UI. This is something that you should be aware of. The UI for Dataverse data-driven applications is very slick. It's probably more modern. I think it uses the Fluent UI kit for their UI components, which are very, very user-friendly, and in my opinion, probably the most easier to digest compared to the standard Power App components. But when you do the model-driven against like a SharePoint list, those are going to have the same UI components that we're used to when we build out the other ones. A bit chunky, a bit blocky, but still, I mean, you're sacrificing some of those UI elements. I don't think it's a huge sacrifice, but understand that you are sacrificing some of the UI elements and the smoothness and I guess the flow of some of those UI element components for speed, right? And at the end of the day, that's the one thing that we want. We want to be able to move fast. We want to be able to meet business requirements in record time and get our business users and power users and sponsors back to business. And if they have a great idea, be able to POC, proof and concept that idea faster than ever before. So that way they can use data points to realize if they need to go left or they need to go right, or if they need to double down what they're doing already. So speed is everything. Okay, finally, last but not least, sorry. I'm getting tongue twisted. I'm not like in my groove today. So, but anyway, so let's talk about Microsoft Team Power App Solutions, and that's going to be the fifth one. Okay, so this last one is going to be Power Apps in Microsoft Teams, or sometimes referred to as Microsoft Team Apps, built in Power Apps. These are going to be a sort of a different beast, right? The good news is these use Dataverse as the backend, really as its main data source. The UI that's generated will be that nice, slick UI using the Fluent UI component. And it's going to be part of your standard licensing, right? It's not going to cost you a premium license. And we're going to talk, later in the video, we're going to talk about premium license, standard license, and why you would go left versus go right. With the Power Apps in Microsoft Teams, there's a lot of advantages here. Now, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. So with all of these, the editors to create all 5 of these solutions, for the most part, you're going to see about 80% parity, right? You're going to know what the components are. You're going to know what the menu options are and what the icons represent. Sometimes you may have to approach things a little bit different, especially for model-driven solutions as well as Power Apps and Team solutions compared to like the standalone and the SharePoint list, which I think are probably 99% parity. But when you come to the Power Apps and Teams, there's going to be a slight learning curve to get familiar with the editor on how things are done in the Teams way. 2, when you build these apps, all the other apps are kind of built in the browser. The Power Apps for Microsoft Teams are going to be built in the context of Teams, right? So you're going to have that team wrapper, Chrome, around your editor as well as your app. And then the last thing is, for all of these other solutions, they're kind of like centralized, right? You can kind of use them, you can get at them for many different scenarios, but the application itself is centralized. Power Apps and Teams are going to be in the context of a Microsoft team. So what does that mean exactly? So say, for example, we built a time management system or a time tracking solution using Power Apps and Teams. And we take that solution and we build it for Team A in Microsoft Teams. That when you fill out that timesheet, only the members of that particular Microsoft team will be available for you to pick users from. Only the members of that Microsoft team will have access to that time tracking system. Members of outside of that team will not have access to that particular instance of the tracking system. So you see what they're doing? They're actually taking. You can reuse these. Now that's the good news is you can take that same tracking application and deploy it to Team 2, Team 3, and Team 4 within Microsoft Teams, but understand that the time tracking data is going to be scoped to those particular teams, and you will actually be getting different instances of the application for each team, and only members of the team will have access to their prospective Microsoft team. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's one of the caveats you have to be aware of when you're working with Power Apps for Microsoft Teams, especially in comparison to all the other different solutions you can use with building Power Apps, right? So what does this look like? Let's kind of look through these a little bit. So let's take a look at an example of a list form. So if I go into I got these all bookmarked, right? So this is going to be very similar for those of us who came from a SharePoint background and used to use an infopath and then text. I have a SharePoint list item. When I click on it, everything is like, this is a custom form, right? So what you see here is going to be custom. This is built within the context of a SharePoint list. So I can click off of that, select another item, that detail gets populated. I can then go new, hit new, but notice what happens. Notice how when I'm looking at the detail, and this is the same form, by the way, it's the same custom form, but there's logic that says when you're doing an edit or a view of an existing item, this is the experience you would have. But if you click new, this is the experience you have. And that's the power that you have in Power Apps. You can really kind of mix and match or, create these different experiences based on the 3 different modes, especially in the context of a SharePoint list. You have new, view, and edit. Those are the modes I'm referring to. And then based on those modes, you can design your form to look and behave a certain way, right? So that's going to be in the context of a SharePoint list. What else do we have? So next, let's take a look at the mobile. Actually, let's skip to number 2. I'm sorry, let's skip to number 3, and then we'll circle back to number 2. So number 3, the tablet and desktop, this is going to be your standalone experience. So let me show you one that's really, really, I'm going to say elaborate. No, that's mobile. Let's put let's look at the timesheet one. All right, so both of these are standalone experience. Now, you notice when I did on the whiteboard, I said I had the tablet/desktop. You can actually have mobile/desktop, and this is what that experience will look like, right? So this is optimized and designed for a mobile phone in portrait mode. You can absolutely use this in the desktop experience. Are you taking advantage of all the real estate available to you? See, hint, the gray bars to the left or right of this? No, but it saves you from having to build this twice, right? It saves you from having to, have a version of this that fills up your real estate and take advantage of this and do some other features and capabilities, and then pepper in that logic, so on and so forth. Now, this is a very custom UI. Let me just preface you with that. This is all these icons were brought in as separate images. All these click events were pulled in, not click events, but all these images had to be wired with the right click events. There's a lot of just UI magic that's happening here. This will not get you 0 to 100 in record time. This is where you're spending a lot of time on the UI, on the experience, and really start to what I would consider busting the stitches with Power Apps, because what you're doing, you're taking a custom dev strategy and layering it into a low-code, no-code platform. And because of that mix match of the purpose of build and the intent, so I guess the purpose of intent and a strategy that goes against the grain for that purpose, it will definitely cost you a lot of time. Can you do it? Absolutely. And here's an example of you doing that. Now, is this worth the time and effort? That's subjective. Usually from an architect perspective, when I'm working with clients and driving business users and sponsors down this path, I recommend against something like this, right? I recommend let's use the out-of-the-box components. Let's use the out-of-the-box UI. Let's try to leverage how those are, the behaviors of those as much as possible. Yes, I'm going to do what we have to do and get creative to leverage out-of-the-box capabilities and what it is built for, with trying and mixing all that into a bowl to meet the business requirement. That's what we're going to drive for. And that's the responsibility of the app maker or of the solution architect to find that happy balance and negotiate with the business users of where we really should be spending our time. Right? Here's another one. Here's another example. This is actually using more of the out-of-the-box UI components. This is like a charting component, which is built in. But as you can see, there's a couple things I would like to call out here. Notice how most of my forms, I start with fields to gather data. But this particular application starts with a display. It's almost like a dashboard. It's like a view of the application with many different areas and components. And then not until you click new client or new project or whatever the case may be, then you go into that form gathering experience. And this just speaks to the power of Power Apps. You can do both, right? It can be a view interactive type application. It can be a form-driven application. And in this scenario, it can be a perfect balance or mix of the two. So you have all of this at your disposal. And this is why it's really important to get fluent and comfortable with Power Apps, because the more comfortable and you know what the tools are, the tools you have in your toolbox, the more creative you will be and the more valuable you will be, because now you become the Power App guru or the Power Platform guru, and you're spitting out solutions at record time. I can't stress that enough, but that's the key benefit of this. Okay, so now let's look at a mobile solution. So with that, I got my apps, my phone shared here. My phone sharing, I'm doing this using Microsoft Teams. This is very simple. You can do this as well. Very, very powerful, especially when you are creating your mobile experience and you want to demo that to your business users. The way that you do this is that you go to the same team. You create a Teams meeting. You join with your phone and your desktop. Obviously, you would do you'll host a meeting using your desktop. But then when it comes to time to do a demo on the phone, you join the meeting from your phone, and then there you will share your screen, and then that will make your phone available to you. Okay, so here, when it comes to Power Apps, let me get rid of that icon there. So when it comes to Power Apps, you actually have to download, and this is changing, right? So at the time of this video, you have to download the Power Apps app, right? And once you do that, all the apps that and then you download that Power App, you authenticate with your Office 365 credentials. And once you do that, all the apps that you have access to, everything you see here is security trimmed based on what I have access to as a current user, would be available to you. Is this the best experience? Yes and no. It really depends on the strategy and how you roll this out, right? Now, if you train and condition your users that says any mobile application for an organization will be under this Power App, right? In context of all the other apps they have on their phone, because this is really like a two-layer experience, right? The first layer is, okay, go into the app. They're used to that. They do that day in, day out, every day, all day, no problem. But then once they click on that, now you get to see the timesheet request and all this other good stuff. You can pin these, like say, for example, if I'm in the timesheet a lot, I can hold this down. I clicked the wrong thing, sorry. Okay. I clicked on something and it cost me like 3 minutes to kind of get out of that scenario. Okay, so what I want to show here is that you can hit this info icon here, right? And you have an option to pin to home. And basically what that's going to do is go ahead and put that on your home page, on your home screen. And now it would just save you a couple of clicks. So instead of going down, to Power Apps and then clicking on that guy, you can click on that application directly, right? So that's one option you have. Now, and to kind of help with the user experience. Now, these are things that you kind of run into when you start to roll out your apps, right? Because from a user perspective, they're probably used to going to the desktop, working on the laptop, and now when they transition from, okay, I'm on the go, or I'm outside of the office, or I'm in the field meeting with clients, maybe you do an expense tracking system that integrates with your Concur or whatever your enterprise solution is. This is what your reps will go through to do that. Now, for those applications that they use often and frequently, you can show them that trick on how to do it on the home screen. Now, from here, this is actually a model-driven app. You can create this once you have your list schema in place, 0 to 100. Probably 15 minutes. First time, 20 minutes. Working application that does everything, right? And you can create a new record, right? You can add a description. Now, here's the other cool thing about it is you can use your microphone capability, your speak-to-text capability built in on your device and really take advantage of that. So here, hello, this is Deshaun. This is a test on the live video. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hello, this is Deshaun on the live video. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's not going to work here. Demo fail. And the reason for that is because my voice text microphone option is being superseded by the voice text on the Microsoft Teams. Because again, in order to show this demo, I have to join the Teams and stuff like that. But understand that if I wasn't doing Teams and my microphone was available to me in the app, that speech to text will work as expected. And here I can take a picture, using the attachment field. And again, this allows you a ton of capabilities now. So I'm filling this out on my mobile phone, gathering basic information about this equipment request, taking pictures using my mobile device, having all of that attached. And then as soon as I hit the checkbox here, which is my save button, all of this information will now be stored in a SharePoint list. So I'm gathering information using mobile, photos, images, text, speech to text, say that 20 times, all using my mobile device, getting that saved up into a SharePoint list. And now I can do other things, magical things with that once it hits my SharePoint list, and do other integrations, notifications, appointments, and so on and so forth, right? So that's going to be the mobile experience using a mobile app in Power Apps. Now let's switch gears a little bit and let me go into Microsoft Teams, right? So here I'm on the Microsoft team. Let me, and this is my all of the teams I have set up in my lab. And let me go to this Supercharger BP, right? And now these are my tabs. So we're kind of used to the tabs, right? So that post and files there at the top. These are my tabs within Microsoft Team. Nothing special there. But then once I click in more, I know for a fact that issue reporting, this is a Power App created in Microsoft Teams. Now notice the experience. Notice the integrated experience with this, with Teams and Power Apps. So what you're doing, and just take a time, just take a pause and realize what's the magic that's happening here. You're taking an already adopted experience in Microsoft Teams, because now our users are using Teams for everything. They're using it to join meetings. They're using it to manage interdepartment information, documents. They're managing it to chat with people within their department, cross-functional people in various departments, as well as one-on-one with their managers or colleagues and stuff like that, private chats. They're already sold this experience. And now what you're doing is, oh, we need a time tracking system. We need an expense tracking system, not system, but an application that integrates with our enterprise system, right? And there's a pattern for that, right? It's not necessary that the asset we're creating, and this is worth pausing and calling out, is not the applications that we're creating to replace the enterprise solutions. We're creating applications to integrate with the enterprise solutions, because usually there's gaps or pitfalls with our enterprise solutions, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Concur, Workday, ... You name it. We got, some organizations have 2 or 3 of everything, but you name it, there's going to be pitfalls, right? So now imagine I'm a sales rep. Maybe I need client data. I have to context switch to bring up the Salesforce app. But if you build a Power App that connects to Salesforce and bring that client data to you in the context of your team, and not only do you have that client data, you can use that to pre-populate information for another process. And you're building this. I'm hesitant to use the word custom, but you're building these solutions in record time with this very powerful enterprise integration solution, and in the context of where your end user, your colleague can work efficient and as fast as possible, because we understand that productivity leaks and detriments and frictions normally happens with context switching and really trying to understand or find your way in a new application and a new experience. This is a Power App integrated with Microsoft Teams, taking on the Microsoft Teams look and feel and theme, integrated very well, feels very native to the Microsoft Teams experience, even though it was an app created by an app maker, not a dev with 20 degrees from a university, but from an app maker that spent 3 weekends learning this stuff and then practice, became very fluent at it and knocking out business solutions at record time. And this is why we do what we do, right? So the last one, okay, so we jumped into Power Apps for Teams. Model driven. Let me see if I can show you this real quick, because this video has become very long and longer than I anticipated. So let's go to the Power Apps portal, right? And let's go to create, and let's do this from SharePoint. I want to create something from SharePoint, and this is going to bring my connections up that I'm connected to. I'm going to use this connector. I don't know why I have all of these. Service account, I understand, but why these are duped, I have no idea. Okay, so let's go to our equipment request site. In that site, I have all these lists available to me. Here's an equipment repair list. Now watch this scenario, and then I'm going to create connect. So while this is working, let's talk through what exactly is happening here. This is the scenario where you started collecting data in a SharePoint list, and you either create a custom form in a custom SharePoint list form. So you work that scenario, but now you need your field reps or your associates outside of the office you need to collect data from them and have it stored in the same SharePoint list. That's the benefit of Power Apps, especially the fact that it's decoupled from the data source, right? So now, just in a matter of seconds, I have a mobile app available to me against an existing SharePoint list that has existing data, right? So I'm leveraging a lot that's already created. And now I can hit the plus sign here, add a new record to that SharePoint list, or I can select one of these items and view the details of the item and modify the details of the item on a mobile application, right? Very, very powerful. And because I use a model-driven wizard in the context of a SharePoint list, this was done for me in a matter of seconds. And I am the superhero, and we're solving business requirements, and we're allowing the business to move forward exponentially faster, hopefully crushing our competition because our operations are automated, our operations are streamlined, and we really have our act together from an operations standpoint. All right. So I say all that to say, and this is very long. There's a couple things I do want to touch on. Actually, let me do this. Let me spend 3 minutes touching on this. And I really didn't want this to be a 40-minute video, but it is what it is. We got to get the information out. Hopefully you find this valuable. So let's go back to the whiteboard and let's diagram something out. So when it comes to actually, let's go back to this view here. When it comes to building these, the biggest question we always get, especially for someone who's brand new to this ecosystem, is how do I know what to build and for what scenario? And then I usually say when to use what, right? When to use what, when to use what, when. Yeah, maybe. So, but basically at the end of the day, it's, okay, Deshaun, you showed me 5 different strategies, 5 different capabilities. How do I know which one of these capabilities to use in what scenario? Now, I think with the list form versus standalone, I want to say these top 3 are probably understood, right? It's either, okay, I need to build something that, I need to use for desktop or be a standalone form. I don't need the list data to be in the context of my user filling out the form, right? Understanding that you can have 2 forms or multiple forms for the same solution. And we just did that with the equipment request. We started with equipment request that was a SharePoint list, maybe had a custom list form for the admins or people interacting with that. And then we spun up a separate app for that same list to be used by the service reps in the field to kind of fill that out, right? So usually the experience between these 3 is key. Now, when you get to model-driven or when you get to Microsoft Teams, understand what those restrictions are, right? So for Power Apps and Teams, you're going to be restricted to that particular team. If I have an expense tracking system, that's integrated with Concur, that expense tracking system is only going to be in the context of that particular team, right? So those things that to kind of to keep in mind. Now, the other key factor is the data source. Now, model-driven applications, and I teased you with this, is that if you build that from a data source of Dataverse, you're going to get a very nice experience. It's going to be it's beautiful. It's going to look like you hired a UI team to work on this application, and you're going to get a lot of that for free in a matter of clicks, 0 to 100 in a very short order, right? The problem with the model driven for Dataverse is that this is what we have as a premium license. This requires a premium license, right? And some of us say, okay, well, what is premium? I think I spelled that right. So you may say, okay, what is premium and what is that going to cost me? A premium license is going to cost you in the tune of, let's do the sticker shock one first, $20 a month per user, right? That's one option. The other option is $5 a month per user, right? On paper, this doesn't seem that bad until you do the multiplier, right? So on paper, and what's the difference between these two? Let me explain that real quick. $5 a month means that this user can use premium license for one application, right? It's like a seated license, right? You have access to one premium application or one application that use premium connectors. And if you have three, then you can't have access to one. You're only got access to app number 2, right? So you only can use one it's not one at a time. Like you have to be assigned only one at a time, right? The other one is $20 a month per user. And that means that, okay, I can use any premium connector. I can use any application that's using the premium connector within the organization. So that's going to be $20 a month. Now, the multiplier. If you have 100 users using this solution, that's a big chunk that you're costing the organization, relatively speaking. If you're a $1 billion organization, 100 users, $5 a month, $500 a month per user per month is not a big deal. Even if you go to 20 $1 billion company, yeah, you probably blow the department budget, but relatively speaking, 100 users, 2,000 a month per user per month. You do the math on that, 2,000 a month, that's 24,000 a year. And sometimes that may be worth it, especially if this is replacing a third-party solution that has a perpetual licensing where you're paying $50,000 a year for support and all this other good stuff, right? So you have to weigh it. For smaller organizations, this can be an instant no-go, right? So usually the premium license, if it's premium or if it's standard, that's usually the first thing you have to weigh. So for standard licensing, normally what you would find is everyone's using SharePoint, right? It's going to be probably the most robust data source compared to all the other standard license data options you have. And so this is where I would say 90%, 92% of the organizations or even app makers within the org will gravitate towards is to use SharePoint as a data source, right? So usually that's licensing, the type of data source that you need would be probably your first piece to figure it out. And then you'll look at the experience, right? So we showed how the Microsoft Teams, Power Apps within Teams, which is standard. It is standard. If you can work within those restrictions, that experience is more streamlined than using Power Apps, relatively speaking, than using Power Apps with the different apps and so on and so forth. So that's it. I wanted to cover a lot more. I don't know. I wasn't in my flow today, but maybe I'll be in my flow again tomorrow. Maybe it's a lack of sleep or something like that. But hopefully this was very useful. Very helpful. Any questions, please leave them in the comment section. It's best now to leave your comments when these videos first drop, within a day or two when these videos first drop, because then I can address them in the next up and coming video. But until then, you probably want to watch this again. I know the delivery is not as smooth as I would have liked it to be, but hopefully the information was there and you were able to get past the hiccups and still kind of get the value add out of it. Please share this video. It's really good to share this with your manager, especially if you're having a hard time trying to not necessarily convince, but get other people to see the value that you see and the vision that you see, because everyone understands the organization and the problems that you guys are having at your organization, but it's hard for people to see the vision and how the technology can solve that problem. So forward this to other team members, forward this to your manager, or anyone else that you think that this would be very helpful, to where they can kind of see some of these things in action, especially, you know, that video, the part of the video where we kind of jump through all the different options. All right. Until then, I'll see you tomorrow.